fitness journey, and became a trainer. So yeah, for the last 20 years of my life, I've been on this very kind of organic journey. I call it like self-discovering on my own what it is about fitness that we need to integrate as humans in order to live life with longevity. And I think that's kind of like the message that I try to bring today with my business. So I own a personal training gym in Edina. It's called Tres Sports. You can look it up online. It's Tres, like if you were writing the number three in Spanish. So TRS all together, sportsfitness.com. And that's where I operate, and that's where I see clients, and I get to work one-on-one with individuals, and I feel like, especially probably in the last 5 years of my life, I feel like as a trainer, I did a very big expansion of trying to gain a lot of knowledge. Uh, but life has humbled me, and I feel like, especially these last 5 years of my life, I have learned to discover what is the essence of being a human, and how can I connect that very small aspect with every one of my clients to understand that us humans, we are meant to stay active, and by staying active we get to tap into a lot of different aspects of our body, of our mind, our spirit, and that reflects on our personal lives. So yeah, I feel like I always like to tell people that I'm my best guinea pig. I've been around the block as an athlete, and I have made a lot of mistakes training. I have abused my body. I've been injured. I've been overtrained in the past, and I used to have this idea of fitness that everything was driven by trying to chase a specific goal. But I go back to the last 5 years of my life. I have discovered this kind of unique balance on my own, where now I understand that I need to stay active, but I also need to be very mindful of how I train, and keep physical activity as a constant part of the picture, trying to keep the balance with training to sustain longevity. So now before, in the past, I used to train to compete in the sport, and try to win a race and that type of a situation. And now my approach is completely different. I wanna take care of my body, so I can continue to feel the way that I feel right now at age 40, when I am 50, when I am 60, when I'm 70. And I believe that it is possible. You just need to learn how to get back to that very small essence that I was saying earlier about what it is to be a human.
And so what was the source of the discovery? What was there an event or some thing you did that caused the awakening or the awareness, the discovery of what it means?
I think I probably hit a very hard stop in my own journey as an athlete, when I had my last injury. And it was a very eye-opening situation for me.
What injury did you have?
So I was training at that point. I was training to run a marathon, and I pulled my hip flexor, and basically I ended up tearing the hip flexor, and not knowing or not having any type of background on that type of an injury. I kept doing a lot of damage for a small period of time training with that injury, and I ended up doing a lot of damage in the long term. But that kind of put me on the sidelines for a good probably 3 to 4 months. And it kind of made me reassess things, and also it opened my eyes to start seeing. I feel like one of the biggest teachers that I have today is actually looking at animals in nature. I mean, it's mesmerizing to me that if you were to just to give you a random example, if you were to see a group of deer living in the wilderness, there's no very big difference among them. They're about the same size. they focus on doing the movements or the motions that they are meant to do in order to survive, and they're healthy. They're incredible athletes. They only focus on doing that type of stuff. Whereas us humans, we start grabbing from so many different concepts, and I feel like the fitness industry and the fitness world today it has a lot of sex appeal, but we disconnect with, okay, what are the human movements that I should know how to do really well in order to keep living life as a human, and also putting in that picture the fact that we need to stay active. Humans were not meant to just be sitting on a chair and in front of the computer all of the time. We were not meant to be sitting in cars and driving. So I feel like as society has evolved, we have become extremely comfortable, and we live in comfort all of the time, and that affects everything. So I'm kind of that injury kind of started opening my eyes to start seeing those things and discovering the value on simplicity, and now with the current pandemic situation, I actually the last couple of months, I've been even trying to evolve my coaching, because I'm not longer right now as a business. My doors are shut. I'm not seeing clients right now at the gym. The gyms are not open in Minnesota right now. So I developed a new online platform for coaching. It's called Low Training, LOW training.com.
Mm-hmm.
And this is basically a virtual style of coaching people, but I'm trying to keep it extremely simplistic, so teaching people the value that, hey, you can get a very incredible workout just using your own body or using a very small piece of equipment. You don't need to actually go to a gym to perform as a human. So yeah, that's kind of like in a nutshell,
that's a great story. What I want to do is take that and bring it to Dr. Foster, and I'm looking to see the parallels in how you advise people in your medical practice to discover how to become centered and how to be a partner and initiator, an enabler of their own health and healing, because that's what I'm hearing when I'm talking to Luis. That's a wonderful story, Luis. I love it. But Dr. Foster, jump in here and react to his story. Then I want us to all bring that back to how we navigate this through the COVID-19. And I still want to come back to where we started, and that's talking about the trauma we're experiencing with the George Floyd incident. But Dr. Foster.
Yes, and just to mention, because we may have someone else hopping on the call, a colleague from California who's a fellow pediatrician, but also does a lot of work nationally around just violence, the intersection of violence, racism, and public health as it relates to health equity. So she was going to try to jump on for a few minutes. I just want to say that.
Great.
But I love stories, and stories are very powerful. And I love Louise's story, and thank you for sharing that. I won't go into my similar story of how I experienced also a medical illness several years ago, and that totally changed the way that I also practice my own movement therapy. It was the first time I was introduced to yoga, because I couldn't do the cardio and kind of the more high fitness and machines and things like that during my recovery process. Oh, there she is, Dr. Boyd.
Hey, sorry about that.
So
why don't you introduce her and bring her into the conversation? Because I don't know how your time is, Dr. Boyd, but thank you for joining us.
Yes, and I would love to definitely hear from her. Take the time to let her speak. Sure. I know she has to go off. Ria, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for inviting me, Tamiko. So I'm a pediatrician who does a lot of community advocacy in the Bay Area here in California. I met Miss Tamiko when we did our fellowship together at Harvard a few years back and got our NPH. I am the lead author on an upcoming policy statement from the American Academy of Pediatrics on the effects of police violence on kids. And some advocates and I here in the Bay Area were able to push our use of force legislation here in San Francisco to consider the public health impact on Black and brown populations here in the city.
Can you lean into your microphone a little better, Doctor? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Sorry,
great.
did you guys catch that?
Yeah, we could hear it.
Yeah, we did, but this is much better. And so advocacy around children and how they're impacted by violence. Let's go right into that. What is the challenge? What is the need? And you've watched what's happening here in Minnesota. One of the things I asked Dr. Foster earlier is that in this program, let's talk about how parents can protect and support their children in an environment that's filled with trauma and violence. What is the impact of watching George Floyd be killed on TV a dozen times a day? Should a child see that? And what should parents do? How do we explain what's happening in the world?
There's a lot there to unpack. I'll say, first and foremost, there was a study that came out in 2018 that said that witnessing, even remotely, so virtually witnessing through your phone, through social media, through broadcast media on TV, witnessing police kill an unarmed Black person in your same state affects the mental health of every single Black person who lives in that state. And the size of that impact was on the order of the mental health burdens associated with having diabetes. It's enormous. Diabetes is one of the largest chronic illnesses in America that's associated with extreme debility. People lose limbs because of diabetes. And the effect of having police kill someone in your state as a Black person is enormous on the mental health of Black people in general as a population. When we think about what that means for our kids, it means they're not excluded from that mental health burden. We know our kids consume media at rates that are often higher than their parents, than their adults. They sometimes do so without the knowledge of their parents. And so I would say during this current moment, we know kids are being exposed to what's happening in Minnesota and that kids are concerned. I mean, I don't know if you guys all saw that really beautifully sung, but heartbreaking to listen to song by Keandra. People saw it.
That was amazing. Yeah.
Right. And here's a 12-year-old young man talking about he just wants to live. Like what's happening to Black kids when they witness those forms of violence is they internalize it. This is affecting how Black kids relate to their own Blackness, their own racial socialization. What does it mean to be Black in the world? And does that increase their risks, particularly for premature death? It shapes how they think about the criminalization of their peers and their peer group. And it shapes their physical, emotional, and social health. Like these are forms of what we consider in health toxic stress. They're prolonged exposures to stressful events that during core periods of child development in that 0 to 5 age and in adolescence impact children's brain development. It impacts how their heart works, how their lungs work. It increases the risk for future illness. And to end, in the setting of COVID, when we have reports that having chronic illness actually increases your risk of complications from things like COVID, we have to think about how things like police violence actually set Black communities up to disproportionately suffer from chronic disease. And I think that begins in childhood and it's intergenerational.
Yes. Ria, I just want to piggyback on that. I know Al got a call there. And what you say is so important. We were starting the discussion about the impact on children. And previously we had talked about just the chronic stress as it relate. The conversation at the time was around COVID, and the chronic illnesses and related to that. When we look at police violence and we look at just the everyday stressors that we deal with in a Black and Brown community, and how that adds the layers to toxic stress and the epigenetics, even when we talk about the ability for DNA to express or not express, depending on the stress that is received on an individual and what that means, even in the womb. So when we have mothers who are exposed to this and children who are exposed at an early age, certainly, and at any age, when we're talking about adverse childhood experiences and how this plays out in the overall health and chronic health of our communities and in our kids. So it's a very pertinent discussion, and it not only affects what happens to us today, but for years to come. And I think about when we talk about a lot about how we're seeing disproportionate numbers of illnesses such as high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity in Black and Brown communities, we often leave out the discussion of the mental and emotional piece that relates to that and how we got to that point. It's not all about the diet and lack of exercise, but how do we also have a discussion around structural racism and practices in place that continue to layer on the microaggressions every day, and the outright, trauma that we see with the murder of George Floyd and others, and how that impacts our overall health in our community. So it's certainly an important discussion, and I definitely would like to continue to have you talk more about it, since your time is precious. I'm so glad you were able to join. Your expertise as it relates to this, and possibly what other policy issues are going forth from the American Academy of Pediatrics and others as it relates to this in our children.
Do you have a couple more minutes, Dr. Rhea?
I do. I'll probably have to leave at 10:45.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So the advice for parents, families with teenagers, and the advice for parents, families with preschoolers or primary age children. I started off telling Dr. Foster about my grandson. He's 5 years old. How does he assemble this information, or how do his parents protect him from damage and trauma?
Yeah, I think, as we all know, and as I was trying to set up the data also.
You bring your mic up again. Bring your mic up. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
As we all know, and as I was trying to set up, the data has shown us, this hurts Black people, and it hurts Black kids, and it hurts us physically, and it hurts us socially and emotionally, like Tomiko said. And so I think right now, as I know parents, grandparents, caregivers of kids are also hurting, I think being mindful that even if your kids have not directly brought the topic up to you, they are likely hurting as well. Ways that parents can be more aware of how their kids are responding is to pay increased attention over the next coming weeks to your kids' behavior. If their behavior becomes increasingly isolated or erratic, or you notice a change in them, that could be a sign that they are having trouble coping with their emotions and their mental health as they process what they're witnessing. If you worry that your child is for any reason unsafe, many communities have organizations that right now are stepping up and becoming more publicly visible to families and caregivers to help you have these conversations with your kids. Some clinics are doing so. So I would recommend reaching out to your primary care provider if you trust them in that way. If you don't, reach out to your church community, to your neighbors, to elders in your community, if you don't feel comfortable kind of broaching this topic with your kids. And for parents that do feel comfortable, bringing it up and saying, have you seen this? How does that make you feel? How are you dealing with how that makes you feel? And then the other thing is just around, like Tomiko said, self-care. I think we all have to take moments to just take care of ourselves. It's not selfish. It is incredibly important. And I think investing in each other and investing in our own selves so that parents can show up for their kids in that way is just exceedingly important right now.
A lot of the social media traffic around this, and particularly around the protests and then the divergence of the protests, the devolution of the protest into riot. Riot is one word. Some would choose to call it rebellion. Some call it revolution. And so there are different mindsets producing justifications for things people do. But that is also affecting everybody, because right now the National Guard is all around Twin Cities, right where I am, pretty close to it. I think in North Minneapolis, certainly in South Minneapolis, in St. Paul on University Avenue. One thing I've noticed in the videos is the number of young people in the protest. And I'm thinking that young people love the excitement on the one hand. It's a way of becoming and establishing your voice and presence. But young people are also easily led. And so I'm wondering, Kelvin Curia is covering the protest for us. Kelvin, the looting that you see, mostly young people or not? Or is it all ages, adults and young? Jump in, Kelvin, if you can. And my question is, what do we do with young people who are going through, for whom this becomes a rite of passage and it's dangerous? Kelvin? No, I can't hear you though, Kelvin. There we go. Yes.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
No problem. Now we lost you. Don't hear you right now. Something just happened. Yeah, so try to get the sound back if you can, Kelvin. But Doctor, why don't you respond?
and looting, quote unquote, that we watch, we put into a broader context. I just tweeted out earlier today a reminder to the doctors who follow me that violence is a tool of white supremacy. It is the primary tool by which white racial dominance is reinforced, is erected, and is maintained. Self-defense against that violence, uprising against that violence is always just. It is necessary and it's life-saving. So what these youth are doing is literally trying to save our lives. And as a clinician, I am indebted to them, and I am going to ensure that I'm bringing forth policy and also working in my clinical role to keep them safe as they do so.
And so the pushback from community sometimes, Doctor, is that, oh, here they go again, those Black people tearing up the grocery stores in their neighborhood, burning the restaurants, looting department stores that give them jobs. Don't they realize they're only hurting themselves? What do you say to that?
This is the same nonsense that cites Black on Black violence when every form of violence in this country is primarily intra-racial. It happens between your same racial group. I'll say that the biggest form of looting that's happened in the United States in the past 2 months is the $454 billion that were given to corporations as a bailout from COVID. The looting that's happening right now is being sponsored by our federal government, and it's outrageous. And what these young people are doing to get the resources they need to take to the streets to protect all of us, we shouldn't even term as looting. It's self-defense and it's righteous. And I am trying to change how I talk about it publicly too, so the two don't get conflated, because it's not the same thing.
This is powerful. Thank you. You know, how can people follow you? I want to make sure that I follow you, number one. And I'd love to have you back, because what you're saying, actually, you are speaking with authority and obviously great knowledge and passion in how we should frame this conversation, because that's the key. And if you start off calling it looting and riots, you're going to end at a certain place. But if you call it the process for liberation and the path to freedom and the path to dignity and to self-awareness and to partnership in the enterprise of humanity, it's a whole different game. And it means that you've got a right to be at the table and that your voice matters.
Absolutely. Folks can find me on Twitter, Rhea, R-H-E-A, Boyd, B-O-Y-D, M-D, like doctor, at Rhea Boyd, M-D. And you can DM me if people want to collaborate together. I welcome input on the work we're going to be doing with the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I thank you, Dr. Tomiko, for inviting me.
So much.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much. And we appreciate you.
Yes,
Tomiko, go ahead and jump in. You can respond now. And this is absolutely wonderful. I mean, this is amazing. Yes. Luis, let me broaden this a little bit. A lot of the people, so you're from Guatemala, right? And in South Minneapolis, the people involved in this protest are all of the cultural groups of our community. So lots of Latino, Spanish-speaking people at the protest. Lots of white kids, white people, adults, homeowners at the protest. Lots of African Americans, lots of Somalis. I've seen Hmong Asian people. And so there's something here that's resonating towards everybody. But I wanted to ask you, as a person who, you said you came here in 2006 as an immigrant, what is the immigrant lens through which this whole experience, how do you interpret it? How do you assemble an understanding from what's going on from the context of coming here from Guatemala?
It's I will say right now, my perspective of the whole thing is I will say it's probably a little foggy and a little deceiving. I think as a person that lives that grew up in a third world country, I feel like I've been exposed to see a lot of different type of issues that a third world country will encounter, such as real poverty, hunger, all kinds of different type of violence, gang members, drug cartels, etc. But I think for most of us people that migrate to the U.S., we have this kind of image of the U.S. as the country of freedom. You come here knowing that this is the place where you can go after your dreams and become an individual. But I feel like lately there's been so much of these type of situations happening, where the clear picture from my perspective, from my angle, is that there's a collage, there's an impact happening between races, and people are forgetting about the fact that we're all sharing this country together, and I go back to, this is the land of the free, and I think for me, I operate under the perspective that I'm a Christian. I have God watching over my head, and we're all in the same playing field. And I think during these times, people forget about that. And it's so easy to just attach yourself to one corner or another corner. But I feel like the main issue that I see is people need to come together, learn how to communicate each other, understanding that there's going to be always different perspective of things, but we need to be accepted on understanding communication. And so to me, that's been the most deceiving kind of part of this whole thing right now, to see that something like what we saw happening here on Monday could happen, and it could happen to anyone. Unfortunately, it was a black man that encountered this issue. But for me, being a Latin person, I've been discriminated before, so I know the feeling of that, feeling like you're under a different type of level in society sometimes, And you have to sometimes just kind of take a step back and accept that people might see you from a different perspective. But it really it really hit my heart to see a healthy male individual, be put in this kind of a condition where nobody was able to help him, and there was so many people trying to help, and the people that were supposed to be helping this individual were not doing that. So I feel like at this current moment I'm trying to process all of this. I actually I posted yesterday on social media that I'm kind of in a loss of words right now, and I feel extremely sad. Um, and that also leaves me with a little bit of fear right now. I am a father of 4 kids. I have a 10-year-old son, a 8-year-old daughter, and recently 2 months ago we got twin babies.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But it really it strikes fear. Okay, what kind of future are these kids facing? And the unknown right now. I feel like we're dealing with so many pieces that are very hard to swallow right now. And I can go back to, we're dealing with the pandemic right now, the coronavirus. So that already, I feel like already elevated the tension on everyone. It's been already really, really high. People are frustrated right now. And there's a lot of things that people are trying to address and trying to make amends with. And then on top of that, you get this horrible thing that happened on Monday, But I feel like as a community and as a person that came from a different country, I feel like we all need to have a self-check mentality of, okay, what if we learn to love each other and accept each other, and I believe that is through that very small angle of seeing people like that, we can start to understand how to communicate each other better and not have these horrible barriers and this type of situations. But yeah, like I say, I go back to the fact that right now I feel like it is such a fog. It's a very scary situation. And I just hope and pray right now that things are going to get better and that everyone's going to get stronger from what's happening right now.
Make sure you won't you take a minute and give people your contact information if they want to do your online training or go to your website. How do they connect with you?
Yeah, so basically, I think the best source of training that I'm offering these days is my online coaching. So that is through, you can visit my website where you can connect, you can have access to find me on my online workouts, and it's LOW, LOW, training.com. And LOW stands to Luis Online Workouts, or low training workouts with very low equipment. Yeah, so that's where you can find me and connect with me. But if you're looking for my personal training gym, is Tres Sports Fitness, TRES Sports Fitness altogether.com.
Great. Thank you. So, Dr. Foster, let's wrap this up with you, sort of reflecting on this conversation we've had. I think this has been rich, wonderful conversation, and we've covered a lot of territory. But I wanted you to sort of summarize and contextualize where we are, what we should be saying to each other and to our community about our health in general, particularly during the COVID-19 virus, the need to do social distancing and to manage ourselves, but also now, and we were saying last week and weeks before, how the COVID-19 pandemic opened the lens on a whole variety of disparities that have been historic and that we've lived with and that institutionalized, and that we probably haven't really, well, obviously we've not attacked them fully because they still exist, right? And so now you add, and we thought that was the worst thing, COVID-19, and now the other shoe drops, the impact of this police homicide. And when we look at this, Luis, we don't look at it as an individual isolated event, though we're looking at the consequence for that unique life, yes, and it's a loss. But we also look at it as part of a continuum, a history, and a broad and pervasive system that is always gnawing away, killing Black people. And it's happening all the time, everywhere, from our point of view. Dr. Foster, what do you think?
No, and I want to end on that point. I don't want to lose that, because I think it's very difficult. And also coming from a Christian, you spoke about being a Christian, and I believe, love covers all. And I always tell people, God, he's a God of vengeance. He's the God of justice. He'll get the justice. And we can continue to say and believe that, which is true. But you have to, which I think is virtually impossible, as much as other people of other colors try to emphasize or empathize with the Black community. There's truly no way to understand what a person is going through unless you are in their shoes. But we appreciate the allies and we appreciate the empathy. I think about as a Black person, especially as a Black man, and just a mother. I'm a mother of a daughter, but I think of, my nephews and other people where I shouldn't have to worry about when my child goes out or leaves the house for the day, if they're going to be coming home at night. That's not something that the white community has to think about. That adds to the layer of the stresses, the COVID and everything else that's going on. That's something that most communities take for granted. But to live with that constant stress, that especially as a Black man who is perceived and seen as a threat, to not know and constantly have to replay and constantly have to be under the stress of this structural racism, which is basically the normalization of a sense of being or dynamics, which is historical, is interpersonal, is eternalized, is structural and institutional, that routinely gives advantage to whites. And this white power and supremacy. And a lot of times we're afraid to talk about it, but it is what it is. And we've had plenty of research, if we want to get scholarly about it, that documented. And even within our own public health department, I commend them because they called out racism as a primary source of health disparities many years ago, and something that they have continued to work on. And I've been a part of that. So I think it's important for us to not continue to defend the indefendable, justify the unjustifiable, or excuse something that is totally inexcusable. We like to look into the past history and dig up things about people's past that doesn't equate to murder. I'm calling it murder because that's what it was. You sit back and you watch somebody who is in a position of not being able to harm anyone, and you impose such violence upon them. I wouldn't wish that or wish that on anybody. It's inexcusable. This man pleading for his life. I can't breathe. I'd imagine as a physician, just treating people with asthma, and I have asthma myself. I know what it feels like to not be able to breathe or take a breath. I can only imagine what that feels like. So even though the ropes of lynching have been replaced now with, strong, aggressive police maneuvers and chokeholds and knee compression and other guns and excessive force, we can't dismiss what's happening and the impact that it's having in our communities. So I have to just speak very clearly about this and be transparent, especially someone who is part of this community, who has family members and myself that I'm concerned about. When I leave the house, am I able to return safely? So I think as we continue to move forth in healing, keeping in mind and calling the names of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, Eric Garner, and the list goes on, that we must always remember that this is not just a coincidence or one and done, as you mentioned early. This has been a way of life of many centuries of systemic oppression against a population group. And how do you rise from that? Will justice ever come in this lifetime? I don't know. As a Christian, I know it will come in the next lifetime. But right now, how do we continue to live and pursue accountability and justice? And also as it relates to our overall health and well-being as a community, dealing with PTSD as a result of this, dealing with anxiety as a result of this. My daughter is older. This has really caused a lot of anxiety in her and the youth, as Dr. Boyd talked about. The ability to not be able to walk out and be free in a world that supposedly is the land of the free. That does not exist as a right for us. And that's just the reality of it. And it impacts our health. So bringing it back to the health, structural racism, violence, police violence against Black people, it's a public health issue. It's a public health issue as well, not just a legal issue. It impacts our health and our well-being. It impacts our ability to grow. It impacts our abilities to have opportunities to thrive and live a healthy and productive life. And it must stop. So I want us to continue to advocate on that as we stay mindful in the sense of trying to heal during this pandemic. This has been a pandemic of racism and oppression that has existed for years. And if we have only given that amount of attention and resources that we have towards something like a COVID crisis, we have been living this crisis for centuries and generations, and has not gotten the attention that is needed. So that's what I want to say about that. I wish everyone peace and wellness. I want to send out condolences to the families of George Floyd and others who have been impacted by this. And hope is being deferred. And there's nothing worse than a hope deferred and a sense of hopelessness. But I try to see the glass as half full, not empty, as a believer. And I will continue to try to preach or teach that message, to teach love, to teach unity, and do my part in that, but also to speak truth.
Yeah.
The Bible also talks about correction of your brother and speaking it in truth and love. So I want to thank our guest and thank you, Mr. McFarlane, for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. It's a robust conversation. So I say to those who are listening on Facebook, if you like this kind of conversation, please be with us every day. We're going live to Facebook later today, as a matter of fact. A number of us are gathering again to broach the same subject. I think it's going to be at 2:00, another Facebook Live session with people that you don't want to miss listening to. But like us, share it, let people know this conversation is going on, and join it, be part of it. Thank you so much, and we'll see you later. Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Brother Luis. Take care. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Oh,
I think we're good. A good meeting, yeah?
yeah, it is. Thank you for having that information. One of the things I didn't do today, which helps me a lot, and I kept saying to myself, don't let what's happening throw you off track. I like to get up and work out as the first thing that I do every day.
I think we still might be live. I don't know.
Oh.
That's okay. We can talk. Go ahead and talk.
I didn't do that today, and I could tell that when I don't do that, it kind of throws my whole, that movement is so important, even if it's just a walk. Even if it's just, people sometimes say, well, I have, disability, or I'm not able to move your arm, just something to move your body. As I started to talk about earlier, when I had went through an illness some years ago, I couldn't do a lot of high impact stuff. So I adopted yoga, Tai Chi, so I really just slow movement, meditation, breathing. So I think anything that helps to incorporate that is so important. Not only to your physical body, but like, as you said, your mental health and reducing stress and anxiety. So I definitely practice movement as my daily way to continue to be well and advocate that other people do that. So I'm going to get my workout in today.
I'm going to walk today. That's my thing. So before, Luis, I had about 5 years ago started using a personal trainer. And I'm the kind of guy that has been obese all of my adult life. And so I started working out seriously at the age of 61. I'm 72 now. And I was like weighing 30 pounds. I went down as low as 265, 270. I'm back up now, and back up in part, I think, because in the past month or so, I've been stuck here at home and not out working out. But that's simply an excuse. I know that, so I know I have to make up my mind to get out and do the workout because I have all the tools I need to do that right here in my house. So one of the things that Bobby and I are doing now is trying to make sure we go out and walk. We used to walk every day, about 3 miles a day. We stopped, but we're trying to get back into that slowly now. And I'll try to get back into my workout as well. But I think the movement is the key, and you feel so much better.
Yes.
And my goal is to be here for a long time. I have a diagnosis of prostate cancer, congestive heart failure, and hypertension. So I'm at a high risk group, right? And those things run in my family as well. And so my goal is to try to pay attention and you do what's right. And you need help. You need reinforcement or reminding, but I think it's important to have this conversation. Important for me to talk to Black guys my age,
Yes.
the guys that are 70 and 80, who can add length and quality to their life by doing what you're talking about, is just discovering that space that connects you to your longevity, I think, and that's movement.
Yeah.
Kelvin, I think we're done. Are we still? Kelvin, I don't know if Kelvin's around, but I think we're done. So that's a bonus after the show.
That's a bonus after the takeout they usually show.
I'm just going to sign off here, guys. Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.